Morphtanoon folks, Mark here, and welcome to the sofa. I'm back with that classic cartoon pairing, Ronin with Kappa. Last time, I got the basics down. This time, let's get fancy. So, why not grab a brush and join me at the painting table? After a bit of googling, I decided on a pattern called Tatewaku for the Nagagi shirt thing. It's a whole lot of wavy vertical lines that represent rising steam. To make that first line easier, I made myself a stencil. Then switched to freehand, which was awful, so I went back to placing the stencil. By the time I got to the second panel, it was going better, and I ended up going back to tidy the original. It was still too dark though. I ended up brightening it by adding pale blue dots like stitches and adding little flower-ish symbols. If you zoom in really closely, it's a bit of a mess, but to the naked eye, it's 2 hours well spent. Haiori time then? Starting with a little bit of smoothing to clean things up. For this, I was going to go with turtles, for obvious reasons. After a test, with blue to make it easy to cover, I went back in with brown to start what would be golden embroidery. With the turtles in place around the sleeve, though, I thought it needed a little more. So I tried to add in some black waves representing a river, planning to make them silver later. I didn't get any better at turtles on the second sleeve, but I did like the waves much more. Once again, back to the first side for some refinements. And then I went back even further to throw texture onto the jacket and cover up the blandness. Having done that, I could start actually finishing the sleeves, working up through leather, orange and yellow for the gold. Along with a few bits of white on the sun side sleeve to brighten it up. The waves just went from dark grey to light grey, again with white on the bright side. After the Haori was finished, I turned my attention to his back. I could just make the Kappa's pouch and the straps plain white, since in many ways the back is less important. But why let that stop me? Instead, I went with a wave pattern called Seigaiha, which I do in, unsurprisingly, a grey-blue, just to make it stand out a little less. Since templates worked so well last time, I cut another one for this pattern. It was tricky to follow the curve of the lower panel though, so I ended up using thin masking tape as a guide, then going freehand on the rest where it got cramped. Once I'd highlighted and shaded the pattern, it reminded me of something. Can't think what though. Accidental J-cloths aside, we're on the last push. Working through greens to cream didn't look cucumber enough, but a little dark blue shading was all it needed. The red basket strips got some dull orange highlights to keep them breaking up the basket shape. For the horizontal bands, I used muted browns, shaded down with brown grey, and built them back up to ivory using rough stripes. The pole was more reds and browns, with another finish of mostly ivory. I reused the colours from the Nagagi for the wraps on the pole, and moved on before I got distracted. More layers of orange and yellow on the gourd for a natural look. And then I succumbed to temptation and used brown-black to add on a carved band. All that leaves is the katana, so let's start with the hilt. I don't want it to draw too much attention, so black grey skin and dark blue wrappings would keep it subtle. Or they would, if I didn't make a lovely blue colour that was far more saturated than the rest of the model. Still, maybe the scabbard would balance it out? Speaking of which, anxiety-inducing Dremel moment. Sorry. I've broken it twice, so this time I'm taking no chances. And now, black. With a few small highlights on the scabbard to mimic gloss. None on the underside of the bust, obviously. As a finishing touch, I added brassy fittings to the katana, leaving a decent amount of black there to keep it less obvious. With a little bit of inlay down the scabbard sides, because why not? Okay, almost there, I promise. A little varnish needed, gloss on the scabbard, satin on the cucumbers and the Kappa's shell. Then we're onto the plinth, and I had something a little different in mind. Ordered myself some whittling knives, dug out a familiar block of wood, and copied a pillar style I'd seen in some photographs of traditional Japanese carpentry. Was I glad of those cut-resistant gloves? These things are razors. Eventually, I settled on a greyish stain made from rust, namely steel wool and vinegar. It looked orangey when I tested it, but once it dried, it was a nice old greyish brown. The wonders of iron chemistry. And since it worked, I painted it liberally onto the plinth and left it to fade. Unfortunately, the scabbard didn't like him being directly on the plinth, so he'd need a brass tube to lift him up, which meant something much worse than a Dremel. I never want to put a power drill into a painted model again. Had to lie down afterwards. To follow that up, I drilled the plinth pilot hole on the wrong side. And then picked up the wrong bit, so the hole was too big. Not going great. With a mix of sawdust and wood glue, I patched the hole and wedged the brass in position. Once that dried, I dab a little stain on it to help it disappear. Now he was stable, there was one last little detail. Kappas keep the dish in their head full of water. Some dark green, followed by a little UV resin solved that one. And there we go. An old Ronin, blind to the sunset, caring for a baby Kappa. I enjoyed myself with it, aging up the face, going a bit nuts with the freehand, and, of course, learning wood carving. Sort of. If I was going to be picky, I'd say the plinth is a little wide, and the sword draws a bit too much attention away from his face, but it is what it is. Having spent 30 hours on this across the two videos, I'm not going to stress over little things. But I'm interested to know what you think. Let me know, and maybe I'll see you next time.